Hello and welcome to the Authority Advantage podcast. My name is Modesta Mahiga. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by Christopher Donaleski. Christopher Donaleski is the founder of AI Advisory Group and the author of The Validated Mind, Decision-Making in the Age of AI. He helps business leaders navigate growth, AI disruption, and exit planning by focusing on one thing most overlooked: decision quality. With over a decade of experience in M&A, emerging technology, and organizational strategy, Christopher works with companies to validate critical decisions before they're executed, protecting investments, aligning teams, and driving real outcomes. His work challenges a common assumption: success isn't determined by the results of a decision, but by how well that decision was validated before it was made. Christopher, welcome to the Authority Advantage podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And congratulations for the Validated Mind. I was mind blown, read the book, went to the site, going through the assessment, going through what it promises businesses, even so on Barnes and Nobles. So I'm getting a physical copy. Tell us about the Validated Mind. What is it about, and why is it so relevant in the age of AI?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, to not get too much and give away things, but I think that this is probably, and if I'm maybe too bold to say this, but I'll state it anyway. This is probably the most critical book that any leader can read this year.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because our AI is moving so fast, but businesses do not move at the speed of technology. They move at the speed of decision making. And when we're looking at what decision making does right now for us, it does everything.
Yeah.
But we're embedding those decisions into automated systems and into AI, into agentic AI, into algorithms and training models. And we're not asking the question on, is it validated, and who is validating it? And so this journey started about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago, kind of informally. But it started maybe a lot longer than that in the form of how I worked with organizations and leading change through emerging tech, through different departments and divisions that were created from scratch that said, hey, look, we want to move into this new industry, we want to move into this new genre of tasks and services and revenue diversifications and offerings, and how do we explore those things? And it realized that at the end of the day, no one likes change, but we do something, we change all the time. We're changing even now. Our actual cells in our body change every 7 years. We are not the same person that we are 7 years ago.
Crazy.
So when you think about like all these like crazy things that change is happening, but yet we hate it. We look at one of the other things that we make is make decisions. We make 35,000 decisions every day, and majority of them are made without any kind of proof or effort on our own, other than what are we actually deciding. And so the exploration of this book was for me to go into. They say that the best way to learn is to teach. And I think going and taking that further, the best way to study is to write a book. And so I really wanted to kind of go into this and say, okay, what do I know, and what do I not know, and how do I really look to see what's the science behind this, what's the behavioral science, what's the neurology and neuroscience say about this, and how does this align? Is this me drinking my own Kool-Aid, or do I actually have something here? And so doing that research, I realized there was 5 forces that really affect how we validate things. That things are not, people talk about data validation. Is this the source of truth? AI was a big thing when it first came out, where it wasn't citing, and it had a lot of and the issue that the hallucinations had was because it was just making up stuff, which, like, you've never heard anybody else make up anything before, right? It's like people make things all the time up, and it's like, so we just have this interesting judgment against machine versus human. But the reality is that the reason why citations were so important, because we're triggered to know and to feel that it's coming from a source of truth. It's that truth needs to exist in itself, and we're actually really great truth detectors. And so when we think about what that means for us, how are we looking at that from a decision mechanics? And so I asked one question, and the question I asked was, why do we have to wait for an outcome to know if a decision was good or not?
Hmm.
And that's what started this entire journey. And I wanted to understand that it can't be outcomes based.
Yeah.
It cannot be outcomes based because if it is, then we're really just saying if something's lucky or not.
Yeah.
And that it can't just be luck. It has to be something different. So I wanted to understand that and explore that. And so that's what this book was. It was me exploring what validation at the decision level meant and what it unfolded and how it unfolded is what I hope to share with people that read the book.
This is amazing. Um, so reading the book and I mean, just right at the beginning, saying that we don't think about how a decision was arrived at. And often, as soon as it's entrenched in policy and it's the way we do things, um, we we adopt it and just get on with it, right? And then, of course, like you said, outcomes then sometimes have us questioning, have us, backtracking.
Yes.
But this is especially relevant in the age of AI, where we know that, for instance, large language models are determined by whoever programmed them. So how, whatever their worldview is and their experience and their beliefs sometimes then
Yes.
determine what AI is programmed to think, to process, and to deliver. And increasingly so, we have these conversations, you know, about the fact that we're now going to indoctrinize, for lack of a better word, the entire world based on a couple of people that are sitting behind, right, the
Yeah.
teaching models, and so it's more than timely. Your book and this entire question of us not waiting until the outcome. When can we, or I think your book addresses how we can
Yeah.
validate, right, decision making before it's been adopted by everybody, it's been systematized, and
Yes.
now becomes the norm. So questions of bias, questions of ethical and governance concerns really make your book the book of the hour. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for helping us pause a little bit to ask ourselves to think about how we think and make
Mhm.
decisions.
Yeah.
Um, so, what is then validation, right? What does it mean to validate a decision before systematizing or automating it,
Yeah.
especially this age of AI?
So there's five forces I talk about, and the reason it actually doesn't happen until chapter 11, and I did that on purpose because I really needed to have it set up because this is
Yeah,
something that is not in people's typical conversations right
yeah,
now. We're talking, how do you write a book about AI that's not technical, that doesn't talk about algorithms and LLMs and system thinking, and how do you talk about leadership? When you don't want to talk about some of the elements of how to be a leader, how do you combine those two together in a way that actually is recognizable, gives people this aha moment, but
mhm,
also simplifies it enough to where it's not overly technical in a psychological or neuroscience way because
yeah,
people are responsive to I think being a little more aware of like how our brain works and health we're a little more health conscious these days.
yeah,
So I wanted to write something that could you know a person that could be maybe in high school, a person that has been in a 40-year career in the C-suite space, someone that was behind a computer programming, and someone that was in an HR profession or a coach, advisor, consultant that could say, wow, we have now some language that can help
yeah,
us walk through
yeah,
how to think about decision making and think about the impact. I kind of go back to something you said earlier, though, because it was something that I brought up. And I said, confidence rarely announces itself as certainty. More often, it arrives as fluency. And so when we talk about bias, and I talk about bias in the book, and
yeah,
one of the things that I want to always caveat this with is I get asked this question more than I probably like, but I have the same answer.
Yeah.
How do you get rid of bias?
Yeah.
You don't.
And
You don't get rid of bias, but the
yeah.
issue is that it's not about bias. Bias is not the issue.
Yeah.
The right bias being understood, because one of the things that we talk about is decisions, but choice and decisions are very different.
Yeah.
So the difference between choice and a decision is choices are about all the things you have to choose from.
Hmm.
Decisions are about all the things you don't choose. And
Mm.
when you think about that, when you're making a decision, it's about making a choice that you've already decided. And
Mm.
that's what it's about. And so when you think about, well, what does that actually mean? It
Yeah.
means that we need to get back to the mission, the values, the goals of the company.
Yeah.
It's like 80 something percent of organizations today, their employees do not know the company's strategy.
Mm.
So there's a gap. And if I'm going to be making decisions, we talk about embedding decisions into AI and taking the
Yeah.
pause, but
Yeah.
we're embedding decisions way before AI existed into
Yeah.
cultures, into policies, into all these things in our work, in our life, in our governments, that someone made a decision. Maybe it was validated, maybe it wasn't. Maybe
Yeah.
it didn't, the test of time just did not really survive. We talk about decision fatigue and decision drift, and it's like all these things that happen. But when do we need to revalidate and validate in the first place? And so I just want to kind of key on that, because it really comes down to that we're not getting rid of biases, that we're understanding where biases fit, where they
Hmm.
belong, and we're choosing and we're not choosing things. And so the
Yeah.
five forces help to understand this. And this is where I think someone once told me when I was kind of developing this framework. And again, it's called the valid framework for a reason. Validation obviously is what the book, The Validated Mind, and I had to, because I love acronyms just like everybody else. From healthcare to oil and gas, building infrastructure and commodities. I've been involved in a lot of industries. Everybody has this, their acronyms, and they
Yeah.
love them. And it's funny because you've been in multiple industries as well, and I know that sometimes they have the same acronyms, and it's frustrating at times. You're like, wait a second, I know it like this, and it's now
What is this?
translated differently. Yeah, so it's always interesting. But so I'll go into the five forces. So our valid framework, so people can take the assessment is online, where we have a research division of our company that is looking. We have patents that are pending right now on the computational elements of it. I called it the five forces in the book because I wanted to make it a little more readable and a little more digestible for people. So
Absolutely.
quickly, valid. So verity is truth based.
Yeah.
These are things that are universally known truths. There are aspects and spectrums of each one of these. I won't get into for today's discussion, but knowing that, say for verity, you can get into the discussion of like absolute versus objective truth and those kind of things. But for the discussion today, we'll talk about as verity as universally known truths.
Yeah.
A is association. These are like echo chambers, groupthink. These are, I make a decision based off of this group of people that I'm in or the environment that I'm in. And maybe I'll make a different a decision if I'm with my friends versus at work versus with my spouse. And so those associations are there and how we validate. Lived experience. Now, people say, why is it lived experience, not just experience? Well, because it needed to have the L, of course. So it's lived experience. And it's my
Yeah.
framework, so I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
But lived experience, and this is and I think the call out on lived experience is that we love to live in a world where people think that observed experience is the same as experience, and it's not. So
Mm.
I wanted to call that out, and I want to make sure that is actually very understood, because sometimes we think we watched something, or we saw someone do something. It's like, oh, so we have this experience. It's like, no, you didn't live that experience. It's not truly yours. It's borrowed experience, and I want to make that again the differentiation. Institution, this is where we kind of talk about the governmental policies and regulations, laws that are in books. It's really important. And some people, you look about some careers and some industries, attorneys, they're heavily rooted in institutional validations, because like, well, you have to be. It's the law says this. I can interpret things and I can do things, but it's still based on those laws, regulations, policies, and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then lastly, desire. Desire is what we want to be true. It can go, if
Mm,
you think about the spectrum that we talked about in the first with the Verity, you can get into the ambition and all the way into addiction. And but the desire is really important. When I first started writing this, and actually just exploring this of all the observations that I had over the last 15 years that kind of made this happen in the first place to say, wait a second, I'm onto something. I think there's something here that I can really tap into.
yeah.
I had the hypothesis initially that, well, don't we just want what's true? Well, wouldn't it be just easier if everybody just validated on truth?
Mm,
But then I realized, well, we're not really designed that way, unfortunately.
mm,
We're designed to kind of recognize truth,
mm,
but we're not designed to think in these like just truth. Because if decision making would be so much easier if we did, right? I mean, it's like, okay, well, what's true, and I'll pick that one.
yeah.
But we don't. How many times do you think I just need this much more information. If I just had this one piece of information, if I just had this one expert that I could talk to, if I
Yeah.
if I just got out of my director seat and I got into a VP or a C-suite role, then I'll be able to understand and think and understand how things work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. We validate on all five. All five fire at the same exact time. And depending on our situations, depending on our environment, they change. So the assessment that I had, the valid assessment, is very different. Most people have taken, psychometric assessments, and whether it's a 16 personalities or a Hogan profile XT, even in the emotional intelligence space, the Gen OCI,
Mm,
all great disc for team building, right? I love all those, and I'm actually certified in a lot of those. They're great. The difference between the decision intelligence assessments is that they're not, even though all those personalities and emotional aspects are how in each of us individually move and decide, it changes. So where psychometrics, they don't really change all that often. If I take an assessment, um, unless something major change, I'm going to probably have that same characteristics and traits
yeah.
for a long time. Over time, you'll see some changes, and if you're getting coached or if you're moving through a massive life experience, you'll see some of those change over time. If you're working through neuroplasticity type of exercises and going deep into that world, you're going to see some changes. But with decisions, it's very different. We make 35,000 decisions every day. And
Yeah.
so every one could be a different validator firing off with a higher rating than another one all the time. And so
Wow.
when we actually can take those and we can understand, okay, wait a second, I make this decision this way during this emotional state, under this
Mhm.
set of circumstances, I can now start being aware of
Yeah.
how I'm being influenced by how I validate. And that's the root of how we build biases.
Yeah.
And so going back to that bias conversation is when you have a company that has already decided things, they've decided their values, they've decided their mission, they decided their goals, long term and short term. Now it's just about aligning those biases, those influences, those ways we validate to the organization and making it aware that everybody can actually act on the same information. And that's really powerful.
Oh my word. There you have the founders. And before you said whether it's something a decision was validated or not. And then sometimes it's a century on, we're continuing with this organization. We do not know why we are who we are, what we stand for,
Yeah.
and the decisions we're making. And it's just the way it's done. It is so key.
Mhm.
Um, to know how we validate decisions. But I wonder then, would you also recommend that it is built in periodically to review how decisions are made? Um, what would be the rationale? Like how would you build a case for that in an organization?
Yeah. So it goes back to what problem are we solving?
Yeah.
So our values in a business don't typically change. They
Mm,
can. And I think that a lot of times we think about our values as like these hardcore, like hard coded things in our systems, but actually they're not. They're semi hard coded because values absolutely can change. Take a person in an environment, move them to a completely different environment.
mhm,
Those values will change. Maybe not right away. Over
mm,
time, they will. They will start to be influenced by their environments and their
yeah,
surroundings, and
yeah,
they'll start to change how they think. A lot
yeah,
of that is built on how we're built as humans. Our the association validation starts
yeah,
kicking in, right?
yeah.
And they start to elevate the need to feel needed. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Mm,
So you start to build in these, and that's why when I looked at these five forces and realize that we don't yes there may be an elevated graph on one side. It might be if I'm acting as an attorney or a CPA, I may have a higher institutional validation for
yeah,
that scope of work. But when I'm at home, maybe I have this desire of what I want my family to be like.
yeah,
Maybe I have kids that I have to kind of put myself in check and say, like, I have this desire, what I want for them, but then
yeah,
is that aligned with what they want for themselves? And so there's these conflicting or contradictions that exist. And I think it's important to call out. What I go back to is what is true. So when you get away from truth, and
yeah,
this is where it's so important, is everything, even though we need all these five to really justify the decision, because of judgment and justification of the decisions,
yeah,
are they grounded in what is true? So even though we make decisions, we have to have, like, we could have all the truth in the world, but we still need to have, well, yeah, but my friend said this, or my spouse said this, and it starts to, wait a second, it's a distraction away from what is true, but it's how we actually process things. Sometimes I look at things and I'm like, did someone else like write this? Because like it was really good. And
yeah.
I surprise myself every once in a while, and I
Nice.
think that we all do, right? There's sometimes like I've heard you say some things. I'm like, man, where did that come from? That was amazing. I'm gonna write that down, put it on a poster, you know. So it's but when it comes to truth, and I spent a lot of time on this, but it was truth does not struggle to exist; it struggles to be recognized.
Mm,
It does not compete for accuracy; it competes for attention.
mm,
So what is it competing attention for? It's competing attention with all the other four
yeah,
forces. And so when we are aware of what those four forces look like, when you say, well, how long does it take to be validated again? When do you need to validate something again? When I think
yeah,
when something changes, when
mm,
you're aware that something needs to be questioned, we shouldn't question everything. Like, and I talk about that specifically in the book. It's one of the things I wanted to make sure was very, very apparent. We shouldn't be validating everything. If we went through this process to validate everything, we would never make a decision. And
yeah,
that's the whole that's not the purpose. The purpose is to make better quality decisions and to not judge on the outcome, but judge on the validation methodology prior
yeah,
to decision being made. Because what happens is if you judge on the outcome, then what happens is you're just judging luck. Oh, that person made a really bad decision and it turned out
oh,
great. Well, they were just lucky. Some people might say, oh, they're just blessed.
yeah,
And whether those things might be true in certain circumstances,
yeah,
the reality is that most of the time that we judge it on the outcome and we relate it to what happened on the decision mechanics. In reality, the decision and vice versa, the decision was a really great decision and it was a bad outcome.
yeah,
We don't control 80% or more of the things that we think we do when we're talking about decisions. We're only making decisions on the things we can control, and we're actually making the things a lot based on emotion. And I talk about this in Antonio Damasio in his book. He talks about how we are not thinking machines that feel; we are feeling machines that think.
I think.
And so when you think about like everything is rooted in emotion, then at that point it's like, okay, great. So can we just take emotion out of it? Well, no, because he talks about in his studies around how people that had the prefrontal cortex part of their brain that was damaged, they could debate all day long about decisions. They could say why one was better than the other. But then when they were asked, okay, which is it, A or B? They couldn't do it. They're like, we can't make a decision. So we know that emotion is rooted in how we make decisions.
Mm,
But can we check that emotion? Can we check our biases? Can we say, why do we think the way we're thinking and rooted in a validated way. And I think that so to answer your question, I guess going around it the long way, would be when it's questioned, take a pause. Don't just defend it, because that's the
Mm.
biggest issue that we see right now in decisions being automated is they're being embedded into architect. It's being embedded into organizations. And when that happens, when human judgment is embedded into an organization, the decision stops to be questioned and it starts to be defended. And
Mm.
that's a dangerous place to be in an organization. When you have someone that says, don't question it, just do it.
Now, to make it really practical, uh, you're selling this to organizations. You're saying honestly, we need to question why we make the decisions we do. Actually, we need to validate them, before the outcome. Um, what would be, for lack of a better word, the use cases you would propose this for? And then what would be the process? Like where
Yeah.
and who in the organization, as a mid manager, do I stop and where do I take it? Do I do it with my team? Am I taking it up, the chain?
Yeah. Great question. So, one of the first things that I started doing with this was I asked that same question. I said, "This is great. This is it can be there can be certain elements that are a little abstract that can be a little more technical in nature. How do we apply this, and where do I
Yeah,
apply it?" I looked at
yeah,
that and I said, "Okay,
yeah,
well, how do I apply something like this to
yeah,
my framework and
yeah,
understanding like what the world needs versus what it's good at versus what can it be paid for? How can I
yeah,
make money off of this?"
yeah,
And then what the passion behind it is.
yeah,
And when I did that, I said, you know what? The things I'm already doing, it makes sense to apply that naturally. So I'll start with the high level and get back to like the organizational level. And so what we're doing at AI Advisor Group in the Validated Mind
yeah,
Research Lab is we're taking this and putting it into three categories. So there's three decisions that we've identified that companies, at least especially in the small to medium size space, they make that they don't have a lot of reps in, and it's very,
mhm,
very critical decisions for the business. And
yeah,
so we're like, well, look, if we're going to take this kind of framework and apply it to something, we probably need to apply it to something big that can get a really good ROI for companies to say, look, this is worth investing into.
mm,
I will venture off and say that this is for everybody because it really is. We all make decisions, and this can
yeah,
help the person making a decision at home. It can help the leader working in charge of 50,000 employees, multi-billion-dollar global companies. And so
yeah,
the application is there. But I looked at is what can I affect right now and put it into effect. So we have a system called the validated operating system.
mhm,
And what it does is very different than anything out there. It's not a project management tool. It's not a psychometric analysis tool. It is a decision. We start with decision. So
yeah,
anybody working with us, we ask, okay, what decision are you making that if you get wrong, is going to be irreversible or very costly to reverse? And we
mm,
start there. So the three things that we've identified is technology disruption, of course. AI is the buzzword of the day, but truly there are so many companies I work with that they might hear the word AI or it may come up in a conversation, but they're not even ready for just automation, let alone AI. It's an accelerant. It's a tool. It is already and will change how businesses operate.
yeah,
It is going to change the world
yeah,
um, in the best ways and in the worst ways,
mm,
unfortunately.
yeah,
But I do believe that it is just another technology. And
yeah,
it's not replacing us. I know that the conversation is always, you will not be replaced by AI, you'll be replaced by someone using AI. And I like to add that, you'll might be replaced by someone using AI, and you probably will be, but you're going to be replaced by someone that continues to add value regardless of AI.
100%.
And to me, there are a lot of companies out there that are not using AI today. They're
Yeah,
multi-million,
yeah,
multi-billion-dollar companies.
yeah,
They have the resources, they have the leverage, they're exploring obviously into this world, but they're doing just fine without AI. And I always
yeah,
say if you can't do well without AI, there's risk in your business. It's the same conversation I have with anybody else. If
yeah,
you can't run your business without computers, isn't that a risk? I was at a Chipotle. We went to Chipotle, was it Saturday?
Mhm.
And I love the Al Pastor chicken. I went there thinking I was going to get like, oh, we just started going back to the normal chicken.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, by the way, are you going to pay with cash? And I said, I mean, I can pay with cash. Why? What's up? And they said, well, our register's out.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh yeah, sure, that's no problem." I was brought up right. I was said, always have $100 in your wallet.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
was never a Boy Scout. Maybe call me Boy Scout, but like I was always told to always have cash with you. I know
Yeah.
that's kind of weird these days. Like no one has cash on anymore. We've been having to turn everybody away because no one has cash anymore.
Yeah.
And it made me think about like the decisions that businesses make about how everything's going to going digital. And
Yeah.
I quickly said, you know what? Like they were able to still do business because they were
Yeah.
able to accept cash.
Yeah.
I've been into some companies that they don't have even a register for cash. It's all, either digital card or credit card or something.
Yeah.
And I got thinking to myself, wow, this is a risk because what happens when we not only can't use AI with our companies, but what happens when we can't think without AI?
Mm.
What happens when we can't decide without AI?
Yeah.
How many people are making decisions right now and they're
Mm.
just typing it in, accepting it?
Yeah.
Ego is our worst enemy. And we talked about the bias and influences of governments, companies, and even individuals. But what about the influence of ourselves? When we ask a question,
Yeah.
we already introduce bias. And so when we think about the questions we ask, everything starts there.
Yeah.
There's three operating AIs that I talk about with our company because um, AI was not Artificial Intelligence Advisory Group. It was Active Inquiry Advisory Group.
Wow.
I started this before AI became a thing, before
Yeah.
ChatGPT was released.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I said, look, I've got to make a decision.
Yeah.
I've got to either figure out how I want to work this company into AI because I was having a lot more conversation around it. I owned an MSP. I had several, a lot of background in the technical space, building out software applications, working with teams, building out ERP changeovers and turnarounds and whatnot. And I realized very quickly, yes, for one, it needs to still stay AI. Maybe
Mm.
it's confusing, but I need to still be in this space because this is the most important technological shift that we
Yeah.
are ever going to face in our lifetime.
Yeah.
So I want to be in front of that. So to kind of combat that, I created a technology last newsletter on LinkedIn and started kind of going into this like full force of like it's not about technology, it's about people and process first.
Yeah.
It's always about people. We will always be a people to people. And I think that the jobs that we get replaced are going to be replaced by robots or machines or automation or AI or whatever you want to call that. We lump that into like one category. But the
Mm.
reality is it's going to elevate the people that actually still care about people.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I started creating this kind of like, what does this mean for me? What does AI actually mean?
Yeah.
And to me, it meant active inquiry. It meant asking the right questions,
Yeah.
making sure that we ask the right questions before anything else.
Yeah.
The second AI was actionable insights.
Mm.
Knowledge is becoming a commodity these days.
Yeah.
Ideas are cheap.
Yeah.
Execution is really, really where it's at.
Converting.
And if you can't take those insights and make them actionable,
Yeah.
you're not creating value.
Yeah.
And then our third operating AI is accelerated impact.
Love it.
And AI, artificial intelligence, is nowhere in those three AIs
Yeah.
because AI is a tool.
Yeah.
It's an accelerant. It's something that we do after the fact. And if
Yeah.
we're not pausing and thinking about how we're validating decisions, we're going to be putting unvalidated decisions into our machines, into our robotics, into our systems, into our governments, into our own thinking. And
Yeah.
and that's not a place that I want to play in. I want to play in an area that I can talk to a person and they can
Yeah.
have their own opinion.
Yeah.
They can have their own ideas and they
Yeah.
don't have to rely on not questioning things.
Yeah. This is amazing. So we've got the book, and the book, and starts off letting us how human beings make decisions.
Yeah.
We still go through a process. We still maybe it wasn't as structured as the five forces, but we still go through some validation, right? It's as the valid acronym takes us through, and then just the implications for organizations when we do that. So how does the book and you help me here, the
Yeah.
tool, right, work? So I understand the background. And then now when it comes to implementation, and I'm going through the valid framework, uh, um, how am I guided then to then see,
Hmm.
because this is a make or break decision. This
Yeah.
could have, great grave implications of cost. What tells me, go ahead, pause, rethink, or redo the
Yeah.
validation? How do the two work?
Yeah. With our system, the way we have it set up is anybody can go take the valid assessment, and what that does is it does two things. It shows one, what their tendency is. So you can take it as many times as you want. We have a compare tool as well that you can compare. Unlike a psychometric, you can take it once, you can take it 3 times, you can take it 10 times, and you're
Yeah.
going to probably see different results. We even have an emotional state questions at the end to kind of help determine what kind of state of well-being was I in when I was making this decision, when I was doing this assessment. And it's a pretty quick assessment.
Yeah.
What it does is it allows you to understand where your tendencies are. Then it's
Mm,
going to give you an insight into blind spots, because that's what it really is. If you have a high validator in, say you're in R&D, well,
yeah.
in R&D, you would expect to have a higher desire validator,
Mhm.
and you'd be and maybe a little more lived experience. Your Verity and your institution may be a little low. But what if you have a person that is in R&D and they're reversed? Well, they're maybe having some blind spots that is true to kind of the norm for that particular space. What are they not seeing? And this is the issue that I see all the time, especially in the emerging tech space, where you have people that are playing around with a new tech, and they're like, this is amazing. I'm all the thoughts are going around how we can use this, and this is really great. And then what happens? It goes into pilot purgatory. It never goes to scale. Why does it do that? Well, it's because they were validating very differently than the validation that needs at scale. I
Mm,
talk about this in my book with the credit score. How
mm,
that when human judgment is looked at scale, there are some consequences of that. There are things that you have to take out because it doesn't scale properly. And
yeah.
so the human judgment that's needed to make that decision, even if it is to remove certain human judgment elements out so it can scale properly,
Yeah.
if you're not validating those properly, then when you go to push this out as opposed to a project and now into an entire ecosystem of a company,
Yeah.
well, if you're not thinking about those things, you're not thinking about the blind spots that you have because you have different type of people that are validating very differently, and they're not
Yeah.
aligned with the overall goal of the company and the procedures that need to happen to make that successful, then you're missing out. So
Yeah.
the other side of that coin is that once you understand what your tendencies are, the
Mhm.
idea is that you can be more aware of when I make a new decision, I don't have to go take an assessment now. I can just say, okay, so I know my 5 forces. I
Mm,
know my validators. I
mm,
am around this group of people. My tendency right now on making this decision is lean towards maybe my association. I kind of maybe feel like I care too much about the people that are involved in this. And maybe I
yeah.
need to separate that to understand some blind spots. Maybe there's signal in that noise that I need to be aware of. But
Yeah.
maybe it's actually distracting me for something that I'm trying to do. So it's giving that full spectrum of, hey, on the outside, how is my tendencies and what do I do internally, and then
Yeah.
how do I look that from outside? How do I read that kind of label from outside the bottle and
Yeah.
get a different perspective? In organizations, we have what's called a Decision Intelligence 360, and it
Mhm.
allows a group or a team to take the assessment against individuals. So if you and I were on the same team and I was assessing you, I could say, "Hey, Modesta, she kind of seems to make decisions based off of these inputs and outputs." You can
Mhm.
take that feedback and you say, "Oh." Well, I don't think that I'm doing it this way, but maybe I am, or this is my perception of how I'm doing it. And it starts to align the teams. Everything
Yeah.
we do in our organization, we have workshops, we have decision workshops that we can do with companies. Um, we can come in and do a full gap analysis of their systems, their application landscape for
Yeah.
consolidation. It's amazing how many applications are, 20% of an application is typically used in organizations. And the small to medium businesses, get this, this is crazy. So small to medium businesses on average have 70 applications. 70. It's around 250 for enterprise. Okay. Out of 100% of the use that you could have, only about 15 to 20% of an application is actually used. And so when you think about the amount of savings, and again, just like all the other decisions have to be made, you
Yeah.
start to have decision fatigue. You start to say, oh, well, I'm having too many options. Like you go to a bakery and try to, buy something. It's like there's too many options. Like
Yeah.
if you had just a cinnamon roll, maybe a donut and a muffin, you're like, okay, well, I can easily make a decision off of that,
Yeah.
maybe. Or maybe buy two anyway. But the reality is if you have 20 items or 200
Yeah.
items, now it becomes very, very difficult to make that same decision. And
Yeah.
so that's the kind of the application that we're able to see with companies, is to kind of get them on the same language, but it
Yeah.
really come down to two things: strategic alignment
Mhm.
and understanding of being aware of how they're thinking about things. Because those two things, oh my gosh, when you have those two things in an organization that is aligned, everything else becomes easier because you're not worrying about making choices anymore. You're
Yeah.
just going back to what has already been decided. You're questioning those, validating it, and then moving forward.
So good. So in a situation, for instance, where I probably would lean towards, let's say, association, and I do not trust the decision I'd make from this. You getting more people in on this so that you can make a better decision that is strategically aligned. Are you going to remove yourself from a situation? What are some of the options? Now I'm thinking about the individual leader, right? Making whatever level they're at, they find out this about themselves, and then I'm going to add this. How do you justify that? I mean, if this is my role and it's for me to make this decision, but I've gone through, the assessment, and I know this may not be best for the organization. This may not be as strategically aligned as you should be for me to make the decision. How do I reconcile that with the fact that this is actually my job to do?
That is not your job to do, or is your job to do?
That it is actually my job to
Yeah.
do. But now that I have greater insight into, how I validate my decisions, and I feel that I may compromise a decision. What Because I'm guessing this has to be owned by the organization. I can't, as an individual, do this and start making decisions where I'm employed based on, I went through the valid method, right? The process.
Yeah.
It'll have to be owned by an organization, because then that gives them the permission to move and to make certain decisions, knowing that they are, for lack of a better word, maybe compromised or biased.
Yeah. So I'm going to challenge that just a little bit, if I
Yes, please.
may.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of maybe add a little bit of perspective to that, because I think it's a great question. It's a question that I think most people are asking right now. So I think it's a great one.
Mhm.
It's the wrong perspective between $5 to $50 million in revenue.
Yeah.
And whereas before I was working with, billion-dollar organizations, and the interesting thing, the needle just moves a lot faster and a lot bigger on the smaller companies. So it's actually really great to see that. But what happens is the restraint is the decision. So I'll explain that. Owner exposure model.
Mhm.
If you imagine you have a circle, a solid circle, and you have 5 rings coming out, and each ring is a level. And
Mhm.
so at the level one, those are decisions that are being made, and every decision touches the owner. Now, that
Mhm.
owner could be a true like owner of a company, could be
Mhm.
a business leader, business owner of their project, their team, their department.
Yeah.
So we're talking about owner a little more widely, a little more general, but it can be anybody that owns that particular decision that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Level two, they're a little removed from it. They have a buffer. There's somebody else or something else, and I say that because more and more systems are being designed in companies to take
Yeah.
decisions on, right?
Yeah.
Automated system. Every time you have an automation, you're alleviating some of your responsibility to that
Yeah.
system, right? And so whether it's a system or it's a person, there's still a buffer now. As you
Yeah.
get to level three, level four, level five is really where you want to be to create transferable value within a company.
Mhm.
And we talk about, like, on the exit planning side, we talk about how you really need that transferable value. If I have a 5 carat diamond ring in my hand, but I can't sell it to anybody, then is it really valuable? It might be valuable to me
Yeah.
as the owner, but if it's not valuable to anybody else, it doesn't have value
Yeah.
outside of an independent lived person's experience on that and what it means to them, their influence of that. And so in an organization, that we talk about the trust gap that it has. Like, so in my book, I talk about the decisions have, there's two parts to every decision. So there's what we call the strategy and execution in a business.
Mm-hmm.
And so we individually, if you make a decision, the what, the when, the where, the how, and then there's the second part of that decision, which is the to do it or not.
Yeah.
And to not do it is also a decision, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this. And it goes back to on the decided decision part of it, is choosing what not to do, as opposed to choice is choosing from choices.
Yeah.
And so, as an organization, the reason I want to kind of push back a little bit on a good, well defined, well established, well aligned organization,
Mm.
you should be just as empowered as anybody else to make a decision.
Yeah.
And if the alignment is there, then you should be able to decide like the organization decides. That
Mm.
is the true value of an organization, is when people can validate and decide like the organization. Now, I'm going to again very caveat that on. I'm not talking about individual creativity, just individualness in general. Like this idea of like you're a person, I'm a person. We think different. We are different. We have different experiences. We validate different. I'm not talking about that. But if you and I are working in the same organization,
Yeah.
there's an expectation that we need to have biases that align with the bias of the company.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why someone should work for a company that do not align in their values. Now,
Mm.
I may not agree with somebody that has different, completely different values than I do. We may be just, hey, we're not compatible.
Yeah.
Should they work for me and align with my values? No, if they want to, they can choose to do that. But the reality is there's going to be some conflict. There's going to be some issues. There's going to be some misalignment happening. And so
Yeah.
we have to understand that at a human level, that if we can have, again, strategy aligned at the company level, companies trust, or people within companies can trust the people that they designate. Delegation, again, in small to medium business, delegation is like one of the hardest things, because it's like there's task and then there's responsibility. And
Yeah.
a lot of people, when they talk about delegation, they're talking about the task. Why delegate the task? They didn't delegate the actual responsibility, the
Yeah.
accountability, the
Yeah.
decision mechanics. And why is that? It's because they didn't trust. There was something they didn't trust. Oh, well,
Yeah.
I'm not afraid that you're not going to do it like me. I'm afraid that you're not going to decide like me. And
Mm.
that's the kind of lens that I put on to organizations, is because what we're truly seeing is that it's not about, if you were in my shoes, would you make the same decision?
Yeah.
Well, how do we know that? It's because, well, this person validates this way. This is the way they're thinking about things.
Yeah.
This is the way that I should think about that. Mentorships happen like that. You think about the new change out with Tim Cook, with Apple CEO stepping down.
Yeah.
He has been around Tim Cook, and Tim Cook was around Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Now, there was a lot of things that they did very differently. Whether you liked the direction the company went, whether you didn't like the decisions they were making, there was an influence of decision mechanics that
Yeah.
was rooted in how they managed and ran the company,
Yeah.
based off of who they were around, association, their lived
Mm.
experiences, all those things. But they decided on things, whether they knew it or not, because of who they were around, the way they validated unknowingly or knowingly. And that's what we really want when we think about succession planning and other things. It's
Yeah.
how do you find someone that's going to decide not only what they're deciding, but what has already been decided? How are
Yeah.
they going to carry that through?
This is so brilliant. Because this presupposes that there's alignment, and I guess your work is going to be, listen, owner, this can only work if you allow it to work,
Hmm.
meaning we're delegating not just tasks, but responsibility, meaning we're going to trust. So there's some background work that'll need to be done when a leader makes a decision. This is a decision that's aligned with the organization. This is exactly what you would have that. This is in the best interest of the organization. I find this fascinating because, I've been speaking about the authority assessment framework and talking about how
Yes.
often we're surprised when really qualified leaders are overlooked, or they seem not to be the person of choice, and this lack of trust and lack of alignment. One of the
Nice.
gates is judgment, really.
Yeah.
That can we trust the rationale, the considerations that the leader has made are aligned with the organization, that would be the kind of decisions you would make in a situation, especially under pressure. And I know your
Yeah.
book also speaks about, how we make decisions under pressure. Sometimes just
Yes.
for efficiency, we might make certain decisions, but with hindsight,
Yeah.
may not be so. I think this aligns very well, because the only way then you can say, yeah, I am going to endorse this decision, I'm going to endorse this leader's authority,
Yeah.
is because there was an alignment in the first place. These are the kind of situations where a leader would defend somebody and then, go later and ask them, okay, please just give me the rationale for that, but I
Yeah.
trust you. The underlying trust is, I
Yeah.
trust you, but how did you arrive at that? Because a couple of people weren't okay with that. I want listeners to really see um, the rationale, the practical application, and of course the efficacy, the effectiveness of applying the valid framework. And my question now is, would you then, talking to SMEs, for instance, would you then say that they would have to do quite a bit of work before, or at least maybe there's an audit of where they stand, such that they can adopt the valid framework in their
Yeah.
organization?
Yeah. So I'll say two things. So refer to like a Uber app. If you're traveling and you're using Uber, there's three decisions you have to make. There's three
Hmm.
questions you are asked. The first one is, where are you?
Hmm.
If you don't know where you are, they can't come and get you.
Yeah,
So you have to know where you are.
yeah,
The second one is, where are you going?
yeah.
And the third one is, how do you want to get there?
Nice.
And business, for some reason, we don't ask those questions.
Yeah.
We don't ask those questions. And if we do, we ask them um, very quickly.
Yeah.
We ask them in haste. And to me, the book was about the pause.
Mm,
It's really about the pause. What I do for organizations is help them take that pause
mm,
and say, do we like where we are?
yeah.
Do we know where we're going?
Yeah.
And by golly, do we know how we're going to get there?
Yeah.
And it's different for every organization. Like, I mean, there's some people that don't mind the ride, ride with a friend. Or, I like Uber Black, I'm
Mm,
Uber Black kind of guys. There's multiple ways to get there.
yeah.
Does it align with what you're trying to do as a company? So
Yeah.
creating that space, there's another quote, if I may, from my book. It's space is not the opposite of action. It
Mhm.
is what gives action form.
Hmm.
And when we think about the things that we've already decided, sometimes you think about, you have a glass jar and you fill it with water, and then you
Yeah.
put something in there,
Yeah.
you shake it around.
Mm,
Those things might be going around,
yeah.
and it's hard to try to figure out one from the other. Say if it's
Yeah.
rice or glitter. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
whatever. My kid just
Yeah.
did a bunch of glitter stuff, and it's like got everywhere. But then what happens when you set it down? It settles.
It settles.
It does what it was supposed to do in the first place. It's going to settle on the bottom, or maybe it settles on the top, depending on the levels.
Mm,
The reality is, we have to, in organizations, we're moving so fast
yeah.
that it's hard to get clarity, and it's hard to count things. It's
Mm,
hard to understand what you have available,
mm,
especially including your people.
yeah.
We have so much unused potential in organizations because people are wearing more hats. They're being told to use AI,
Yeah.
and they haven't even mastered using Excel. um,
And there's so many apps that have got
and
great.
there's so many apps. Like there's so many decisions that we're having to make, and it's like,
Yeah.
why don't we focus on the things we've already decided?
Yeah.
And then let's make sure we validate everything against those as an organization. Make sure that we validate the things that matter, And then let's figure out what else we have to do because not everything, like we talked about, not everything needs validation,
Yeah.
but the big things do. And the
Yeah.
things that matter does.
Yeah.
And before we embed it into a system and before we embed it into an AI agentic workflow, before we embed it into our people,
Yeah.
well, this is just the way we do it. That's embedded. That's unvalidated embedded decisions in a
Yeah.
company showing its face.
Yeah.
We need to take pause and ask the question. We need more active inquiry in our workshops, in our meetings. We need to make sure that why the heck are we doing what we're doing?
Yeah.
Why does it matter?
Yeah.
And to me, this framework allows us to put some quantifiable and
Mm.
qualifiable measurements around it because outcome is just a really bad way to understand decision mechanics. And organizations should be defined by how well they make decisions, regardless of the outcome. Don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, I'm not trying to say outcome is not important at all, like performance outcomes, like things that you need.
Of course.
But if you get this right, then
Yeah.
by default, the outcomes are right.
That's right.
And maybe you're wrong a couple times. Your decision is it wrong? That's the question we should be asking. Is the
Mm.
validation on how we validate our decision, was that wrong? Because
Yeah.
if that wasn't wrong, and you and I have you talked about before this call about how entrepreneurship really challenges us and
Mm.
really questions us. Are we doing the right thing?
Yeah.
And we know that if you're in it long enough, you know the answer is yes.
Yeah.
If you stuck it out, you know all that consistency, all the things that people told me that I shouldn't be doing, all the
Yeah.
things that I know that I should have been doing, all the things that maybe I didn't do because I was paying attention to other validators that really weren't aligned with what I knew was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And if I'm consistent with those things, did the outcome eventually work out? Yeah. But if I would have judged those those validators on the
Yeah.
outcome in the short term, I would have lost the long-term gain because I would have said something was wrong with the strategy, and it
Yeah.
wasn't. It was wrong with how I was validating or executing it. And it maybe was just a time thing. So taking a pause and really kind of going, go take a walk, take your shoes off,
Yeah.
go get grounded in life. And I think that we'll all start to realize that the answers will show itself. Our ability to think about thinking is really where we have the advantage, and we need to take that advantage as humans in an increasing AI world. And I think that's to me one of the best ways we can think about how we can stay uh, in a place to add value
Yeah.
in the next couple of years.
Because I was going to ask you, what are some assumptions we're making? I mean, you just answered my final question. Actually, you. It's like number 11 of the questions I was going to ask you.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but just in case there's an entrepreneur, is maybe a small business owner, they're thinking, what's the worst that could happen if I don't, right? You just do you not want to maximize your potential? Do you not want to optimize for the right things, right? Do you not want to question why you're making the decisions you're making before you go ahead? And I love the fact that I'm sure when you're doing these assessments and you're working with organizations, you get them to quantify the cost of
Hmm. Yeah,
taking this pause, right?
yeah.
Um, because
Yeah,
then,
we actually can track the ROI of decision making in our validated operating system. It's actually really incredible some of the stuff we can do around that to
yeah,
understand the gaps. And because not making decision, it can be just as costly as making decision
yeah,
or making the wrong one. So we track that, and it gives some tangible ways for people to say, again, I'll leave with I know we're at end here. I used to do a lot of speeches 2-3 years ago, and I'd always ask three questions. I would ask, who's using AI today?
yeah,
And when I used to ask the question, of course, like a little couple hands would go up.
yeah,
And then I would ask, okay, well, who used AI today? And fewer hands would go up. Now today, when I ask that question, almost everybody's hands go up, right?
yeah,
But then the third question always is always fun. Who today is tracking the ROI of the AI they're using? Every hand goes down. And so I was like, that has to be a component in our systems. We have to be able to show like, why are you using AI? Because it can't just be because it's cool, it's better,
yeah,
it's showing us some stuff, we can do some cool dashboards. Like, okay, come on, like let's be a little more creative. But the ROI is so important to be there, and this helps qualify and quantify that. So yeah, to your point, I think it's critical for ROI to exist in the conversations. It has to.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't exist if not.
Because they'll glaze over, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I already, I'm subscribed to 70 apps and I've got this going, I've got this ERP, and now we're modularizing this component, right? But to say honestly, I see this, for instance, strategic planning,
hmm
like building this into strategic planning, right?
yes,
Where are you going? How do you want to get there? And what are these consequential decisions that need to be made? And to not just have the piece, but the business case,
yes,
validating them, before going
yes,
ahead. I think you're onto a brilliant thing. I
yeah.
see the value of what you bring through the validated mind. So those who want to get a copy, I just mentioned Barnes and Nobles earlier.
Yeah, we're on Amazon as well. We're going to
Nice.
be, if you're local to the Houston and the Woodlands, Texas area,
Yeah.
we're going to be in a couple of the local bookstores as well over here. And then if you, thevalidатedmind.com is probably just a really great source to go to. You can go and get our book directly from us. There's a couple different options to get some extras with that. Anybody that buys the book and go there, you can actually submit. It's for free. You go on there, just give us your receipt to show us that you bought a copy, and we have a lot of really cool extras to give you in return for that. This coming fall, we're launching our validation practitioner program that will be opened to advisors, consultants, coaches to take this and really move it forward in a space that matters the most, where people are dealing with decisions every day. So we're really excited about that, and yeah, I mean, I think more to come. There'll be this is just the beginning, so I'm super excited about it.
Christopher, amazing what you're doing with this body of work, with just questioning us to think about how we think. And I love that you have this wider, broader vision, right, of taking this out and equipping practitioners to take this out into organizations. I wish you all the very best.
Thank you so
I
much.
also want to share your LinkedIn, so I'll make sure that that's in the show notes
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
If our leaders want to reach out to you, do they do LinkedIn? Do they email?
Yeah, I mean, I'm
What can they
very
reach out
active
to
on
you about?
LinkedIn, so LinkedIn's great. Yeah, reach
Yeah.
out to me on LinkedIn, and then from our websites you can access and fill. We have forms and emails as well. Modesta, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure to be on your podcast. Have had a great time. Thank you so much for inviting me out here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Wish you all the very best. We're going to get back and talk about
Yes.
5 years ago when we started the validated mind, right? I look forward to that.
Absolutely.
I'm wishing you all the very best. Thanks,
Thank you so
Christopher.
much. All right, take care.
All right. Bye.